Hi, everybody. This is Lori. I am the founder and CEO of Inclusivity, and we are a company devoted to sustainable fashion, kindness, and justice. And this is our podcast, Inclusivi-TALKS, and we are incredibly fortunate to be talking today with Volta Voloshin-Smith about her art and her creativity and kind of what makes her tick. And the reason we're talking with Volta is she has actually volunteered to be one of the artists for our Artists Who Share auction, raising money for coronavirus recovery. So we're so thankful for her. So Volta, thank you for being here and welcome.
Lori, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
So I would love to just talk a little bit, just starting out, of sort of how you came to be an artist. So looking back over your life, when would you say you sort of knew that that was a passion for you?
Yeah, I would say I was definitely one of those artists that started early in childhood. So I'm originally from Moldova, and Moldova used to be part of the Soviet Union. And so while I was, a small kid, like a little girl, I guess the media that we had access to was very limited because of the Soviet Union. But as soon as that kind of broke apart and Moldova became independent, all of a sudden there were like all these new shows, cartoons, and movies from, abroad that we just had access to. And I think what made me kind of fall in love with art was just seeing the vibrancy of the different cartoons. So like I grew up, I didn't even know English at that time, but I loved Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon because the cartoons were just so colorful, so vibrant. And it was like instant love at first sight. And that's when I knew that I just wanted to be able to recreate those kind of beautiful images.
So Volta, how old were you when that happened?
I was, so let's see, the Soviet Union fell apart when I was about 2 or 3 years old. So by the time I was like 6 or 7, when I was kind of starting to, watch TV, one of the, I guess, cartoons that really stood out to me was Sailor Moon, which is a Japanese anime show, and it was just so colorful. And yeah, I just remember like being so obsessed, like wanting to redraw every character. So I would say that's kind of how my art journey really started, is when I first fell in love with just that visual element of like just seeing those bright colors. Because like in the Soviet Union, like there were cartoons, there were movies, but there just wasn't that vibrancy of colors for some reason. So like whenever I got to experience that, it was just like a whole new world.
So even though you were young, you recognized that there was a dramatic shift in the visual world around you.
Yes.
Oh, that's so interesting. Now, tell me a little bit about your parents and your family. Any other artists as you were growing up? Any other artistic types?
Not really. Actually, like a little bit later in life, my mom is now crocheting and knitting and doing all these different artsy things. But growing up, I wasn't really surrounded by artists, or I did. And it's so interesting. Like in school, I remember I had an art teacher who would compliment my art and say, "Oh, this is great. I'm gonna keep it so I can show it to other people." And I just remember, being little and that feeling of like, but I want to keep my art.
Yeah.
And I think, kind of having that experience in Moldova, and then over the years kind of immigrating to America, I kind of have let go of that part of me, just because it just felt like, oh, well, I don't want to give away my art, so I'm not going to paint it, I think, in that sense. It made sense back then, but
So you almost didn't want to create it because you were afraid someone else would take it, whereas if you just kept it in your head, it was yours.
Yes. Yeah, and it was so interesting how now like fast forward to high school in America, and I was in some group project where we had to present some kind of story, and I was doodling to kind of aid with the presentation, and my classmates were like, "You're really good. You should take some art classes." And I was like, "Oh, no, that's not for me. Like, I don't know." No, I don't really do that. But then, whenever they mentioned that, I just kind of was like, okay, well, maybe I'll give it a try. Why not? Because you had to pick electives in high school and all that. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Just help me pick something. And they were like, are you good at art? I'm like, I think I am. I don't know.
How old were you when you immigrated?
I was 14, 15.
Okay. How was that?
That was very challenging.
I can't imagine.
It was a culture shock for sure. It took me quite a bit of time to assimilate, and especially at that age, I feel like, when you're 14, you're like an angsty teen, and you just want to keep your friends and keep your environment the same. And so I already didn't want to be singled out, but on top of that, I had no choice because I was kind of the only foreigner in the classrooms. So it was a weird experience. But of course, now that I'm older, I'm so grateful to have had that, because the opportunities of living in America, like all these opportunities, I would have not been able to be an artist in Moldova. That's for sure.
So even now, that just would not have been an option.
I honestly, it's been so long. I do go and visit. I have relatives there, but from like the point of view of a career or anything like that, I'm just so far removed, and I just cannot imagine it. I don't know. Yeah.
So you moved here at about 14.
Yes.
And did you speak English at that point?
I spoke a little bit of English. I was studying it at school at that point, and also, just binge watching cartoons on Cartoon Network. So that was kind of my introduction, and then I just started picking it up as I was immersed in it.
Mm-hmm. And tell me about your family. How many brothers and sisters? How many of you were there?
Yeah, I have a brother. He lives in Moscow with his wife. Mm-hmm. I don't get to see him very often, but we do Skype and we do, face-to-face kind of things. So it's a little bit, definitely thankful for the internet and like opportunities like this where we can still communicate if we're far away.
And what made your parents decide to immigrate to the U.S.?
It was just better life and job opportunities. So after the Soviet Union collapsed, it was just such a hard time for everyone. And my dad is a math professor, and he would tell me like there were times where like people just like professors, nobody would get salaries for months on end. And it was just so hard to, provide for a family. And so that kind of prompted him to look abroad and visit different conferences that had to do with math and his subject field. So thanks to math is why I'm in America, and I'm just so grateful.
So you went to high school, you figured out once again that you're an artist.
Yes.
And what happened from there as far as your art?
Yeah, so I took like all the electives I could as far as art was concerned, and then being an immigrant and having immigrant parents, I listened to them as much as I could. And so they kind of nudged me into the direction of going to school for business and marketing. And even though that wasn't, my first choice, I just kind of, I don't know, just followed along with that. But so even though I, in college studied business and marketing, I always was doing some kind of creative project on the side. So at one point it was photography. I was heavy into like surrealist photography stuff. And then at other points it was just sketching or something, but I always was always so drawn to that. And I knew that, no matter what, like even if I had to work at a 9-to-5, in a corporate environment, like I didn't care. I knew I had my art that I could always turn to.
I've had a couple other artists say to me, whatever it is, I have to be creating.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter really what the medium is.
Yes, absolutely.
So besides art, what are your other passions? Like what are the other things that really interest you?
Yeah, I would say I love food. I think so. I'm a food illustrator, so naturally I love to paint it. But I also have recently just kind of rediscovered this passion of make or like preparing the food, like chopping the ingredients. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, just kind of seeing how the things are, like food is cooked. I don't know, that's just fascinating to me. And then baking as well, along with cooking, kind of like just whisking things up is, it's yeah, it's just been having a blast with that.
It's another creative and fun outlet.
Yes, and I've kind of found that it's a new hobby for me, whereas it's a nice break from art because art now is my job. So there's like sometimes it's hard to separate where like, oh, am I making this piece? Should I make a video of it while I'm painting it because content,
Right.
Whereas with food is just like something, a creative outlet where I don't have to worry about documenting or anything like that.
That makes so much sense. So you mentioned that you're now a food illustrator. So I find that really interesting. So I'd like to know how you got from high school really to the job as a food illustrator.
Yes, yeah. Okay, high school and then college. So the food illustration part came much, much later. Because after college, I spent about 7 years working in marketing. And during that time, I was just sketching on this, outside of work, just doing my creative thing. And then once I decided to leave my marketing role and do art full time, I was, at that point, I hadn't really, I knew I loved to paint art, but food, but I also liked other subject matters. So I hadn't really, picked kind of a position. Just even though, you're, of course, artists, we're free to paint whatever we want, but I found that it was really good to find something to specialize in, just because it's a little easier to kind of find collectors and people that, are liking your stuff. And so I think the way I kind of embraced the food illustrator journey was meeting a lot of local restaurant owners, going, trying their food, becoming friends with them. It just kind of like kept like seeing them posting food, just kind of kept refueling that passion of mine. And eventually, I was like, okay, I really love food. I feel so connected to it. And even recently, I kind of had like a discovery where I remember when I was little, my parents would take me to my grandmother, and she lived in a smaller town out in the Ukraine. So it was like on the border, very close to Moldova. And I just remember so vividly picking fresh vegetables, fresh fruits and berries. And I just really think like that connection from my childhood is what kind of is resurfacing and is fueling my practice of doing food illustration.
Are there certain foods that you love to, like, would you say what I really love to draw is something in particular, or is it kind of any food? This is so interesting.
Yeah, thank you. I would say I love a lot of different foods, but what I gravitate most towards painting are desserts, but also fruits and veggies. So for example, the panel that I'll be painting has a donut on it. And I think a huge part of why I'm attracted to donuts is that they come in such vibrant and happy colors that I just like want to emulate that and share it with the world, and like maybe uplift someone's day with just, oh, look at that pink donut. It's so happy with the cake.
So since you mentioned the panel, tell me a little bit more about what your thought process is as far as the panel. And if you have anything to show us, I would love to see it.
Yes, of course. So I got started on it. If you can see here, it's a donut, and it's got icing that's going to be kind of dripping onto the background. And then I'm also going to be adding tons and tons of sprinkles. So it's going to end up a very happy looking donut.
I love that. I love happy looking donuts.
I'm sorry?
I love happy looking donuts.
Me too.
So what are you creating with?
I I'm using acrylic paints and also these acrylic markers, the Posca pens.
Okay. So are the acrylic markers basically acrylic paint in a marker form?
Yeah, they're really great. It gives you a lot of control, and you don't have to worry about, accidentally or even having to use water, to clean the brush and whatnot. So for the background, I used a larger brush because it's easier to apply. But for details and even like blending and things like that, I really have been enjoying these markers a lot.
And does the paint come out as wet as paint?
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
It's just acrylic paint, just in the form of a pen.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So do you work for a specific group, or are you a freelancer? What's your job now?
Yeah, I guess I freelance. I like to refer to myself as a business owner because I don't know, it just gives me more of like empowerment to to own it, because I do run everything, and I do the marketing and sell things and then do projects for people. So yeah, I do have a couple of clients that are recurring where I create animations for them. They're food recipes that I animate. So that's been a lot of fun. And then I create gifts, and then also, custom commissions, like someone, a recent commission I did was different fruits. They wanted like a gallery wall of fruits. So that was a lot of fun to create.
Do you have any work that you can show us?
Yeah, of course. Let me see.
It would be kind of fun to see some of the things you've been working on.
Yeah. Let me see.
And Volta, as you're getting that organized, do you have any goals or specific dreams that you're thinking, this is what's next, or this is something I haven't done yet that I really want to do?
Yes. Let's see. I think I would love to publish a book one day. So I haven't really thought about, what I think it would be definitely involving watercolors, and maybe food, but it doesn't have to. I think, yeah, I would just love to find a way to share the message that anyone can be creative, and show just very approachable steps to doing that, especially using the medium of watercolors, because that is kind of how I found my way back into art once again, after taking some breaks. Is I was working full time, I was going to school full time, and I needed a quick kind of creative outlet. And so I picked up a set of watercolors. And what appealed to me at the time was that you just open up the palette and you start painting. So you don't have to unscrew tubes, wear an apron, prepare all the things, And so I found that having those kinds of like little hacks that you can trick yourself into injecting that creative activity into your life, it just makes such a huge difference. It's made me so much happier, and I really want to share that with the world.
So are you thinking a book that specifically talks about, here are ways to be creative? Here's some tips for being creative in your daily life. That kind of thing?
Oh, yeah. Honestly, I think it just kind of came to me as I was speaking of it. I just have always kind of like aspired to have some kind of book out there, but I think like what is really near and dear to my heart is empowering people that feel that, oh, I don't have time to be creative, or maybe they were creative in the past but stopped for some reason. So I wanna bring that spark back into their life.
I like that a lot.
Thank you.
I think that could be a great book.
Thank you so much.
So show us some of the work that you were.
Yeah. So here are a couple of my recent cocktail illustrations.
Oh, I like that.
This was kind of like a little mini series. And then I also did a couple of fun patterns of fruits. So some mangoes and some watermelons. And then another piece that I want to share is this giant chocolate chip cookie. So as you can see, a lot of it is very much food related.
But food is beautiful. Like
Yeah.
I totally get that. Like having food paintings around, I totally understand that because food really is lovely.
And I love the bigger meaning of it too. Food brings people together. It's not only like nourishment for your body, but it could be nourishment for your soul, because you can have conversations that, this is, you typically, like, people have meals and that's how they get closer to each other, is through those types of conversations. And yeah, food facilitates that.
So I don't usually ask people this, but this kind of fits with what you just said. How are you doing during this pandemic? How is that? Because as you said, food is such a social thing. And so that's such an important part, it sounds like, of you.
Yeah.
So how are you managing during all of this?
Yeah, it's been challenging, to say the least, but I am taking this as an opportunity to innovate and just think outside the box. So something that resulted from the quarantine is my husband loves to make cocktails. And so together we teamed up, and every Wednesday we go live on Instagram. And so he'll show people how to create a cocktail, and then I'll show people how to paint it right afterwards.
I love that.
Thank you. So it's been a nice kind of way to, stay engaged with my audience, with my friends that follow me, and at the same time, just kind of introducing maybe a new cocktail or mocktail that people can give a try, but also then maybe get a tip or two from, like, how to paint it with watercolors.
I love that. You should consider that as your first book, because it would be easy to do, and you could literally do a cocktail book with paintings and recipes.
That is a great idea.
And it would be beautiful. Like I'm totally picturing it, and I'm like, well, I want that cocktail book. My daughters want that cocktail book, because I think it could be really beautiful, and it would be something you could do sort of as your first step into writing a book.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
you're so welcome.
Good idea.
So if you had to tell other people who are do you have any children?
I do not.
I was just asking because I hadn't thought of it, and you just mentioned your husband. So if you had to tell people coming up sort of what your advice to them would be, particularly artists, but really anybody, what would be sort of a piece of advice that you'd offer to other people about having a life that feels right to you?
Mm-hmm. I would say, following your passion can be very difficult. There's ups and downs along the way. And so I think mindset is going to be everything. So it's going to be the key to just, getting to a success, whatever success is in our heads, is like, to get to that point, we have to have a positive mindset and just constantly strengthening that muscle, because it really is, with different experiences that we have, I feel like we can strengthen the resilience, and ultimately it just comes down to the people that succeed. I just feel like are the ones that haven't given up ever. They just kept going no matter what challenges have come their way. And so that's that. If I could, provide or share one piece of advice, it would be that just kind of practice a strong mindset to always, like, to keep going no matter what.
Mm-hmm. And then my other question that's kind of related to that is, for you, what are the most important things as you sort of plan your life or make decisions about things? What are the things that are your central core beliefs, the things that matter the most to you?
Yeah, I would say positivity, optimism, and good vibes. So a while ago, I took the Strength Finder test, which I also recommend to anyone, because it's just so great to know what your natural strengths are. And one of them for me came up, one of the top 5 was positivity. And everything made sense, because once I learned that, I was like, yes, that is 100% me. And I do want to share that, being optimistic doesn't necessarily mean that you're happy all the time, that everything is just, rainbows and unicorns. But I think it's having the outlook that, if you're having a difficult day or going through a challenge, that better things are ahead, that just having that hope alive and, just kind of keep going, kind of the same what I mentioned before.
Well, and I love that you said it that way, that it doesn't mean that you're always smiling, and it doesn't mean that everything is perfect. It means that when hard things happen, you try to frame them in a way that lets you move forward.
Yes.
And see the positive things, even in things that are difficult.
Absolutely. And it's, goes back to that mindset stuff. It's being able to catch your thoughts and saying, okay, this thought doesn't serve me, so how can I make it serve me?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that, again, I think optimism or, being positive doesn't mean you don't notice when things are bad. It's that you try to do things to make things better.
Yes.
And so if you notice that there's oppression, you actually try to take steps to help other people. And I think that that's a huge thing. It's also, I don't know how much you know about the science of kindness and the research behind that, but there's a lot of research that the way to be happiest is to actually first of all, have that positive framing, so that whatever happens, you can look for the positive piece of it or move forward. But also kindness, actually, it makes us happier. It's better for our souls, and it's better for our personalities. It's better for our health. It's better for everything. I will tell you that being with you is a pleasure. You are just delightful. And when you said that your core belief is, this positive energy and really working at that's so clear from being with you. So I just want you to know that that's not a surprise.
Thank you so much, Lori. That means so much. Thank you for saying that.
You are so welcome. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about is if you could look back at your life and just tell me a story. And I always like to tell people that this doesn't have to be the story. You don't have to rack your brain to find the most important thing that's ever happened to you. It doesn't have to have a lesson. It can just be something that when you tell us, it gives us a little picture of you that we didn't have before.
Yeah. Okay. So something that comes to mind whenever I heard that question is, let's see, I was about, I think, 15 or 16, and my mom and I were traveling. So my dad had already gone to America, and we went to visit Moldova, but we were coming back to America. So it was just me and my mom. We were about to board a plane. I think it was like a connecting flight in Amsterdam or some connecting city. And so we were in line trying to, get our boarding passes and all that. And there was this guy that, the security checkpoint people that were checking your passports and whatnot. And as we were standing in line, I was always kind of anxious about getting to the gate or the flight on time, just because I don't want to miss it. Oh my gosh, I can't miss the flight. So I was kind of, anxiously thinking of that. But I noticed that right ahead of us, there was a lady that was clearly from Eastern Europe, because she was speaking some Russian, or she was trying to speak in English, but she was having a hard time. So she didn't know it very well. So she was using some Russian words. And I think the security guard, the checkpoint person, he overheard me speaking to my mom. And so he approached me, he was like, hey, do you speak this lady's language? And I said, yes, I do. And so he was like, can you help us just answer some questions or translate so that we can, get her documents in order? And I was like, sure, of course, yeah, no problem. And as I was helping and we were translating the questions, everyone else had already boarded the flight. And, I was answering questions, but also anxiously looking over. I was like, oh no, please don't let him fly without us. And the guy was like, don't worry, you're okay. And the kind of the special part about that experience was that as soon as, we finished, the lady, got cleared. She was able to board the plane and everything. We approached like the flight attendant. We had to get our seats assigned. At that point, we haven't had that yet. And the flight attendant, she was so nice. She said, "So we noticed that you were helping the security agent. Thank you so much for helping with that translation. As our way of thanking you, we want to offer you business class seats."
Wow.
So this was an international flight, across the ocean in a business class seat. So my mom and I, we were just floored because we would have never been able to afford, a luxury like that. And it was just like such a special experience in that, we didn't really know what would have happened. We just, wanted to help out someone, but then such a nice way to, because we missed out on getting our seats assigned, they were like, "Hey, here's some nice seats for you because you helped out."
Well, that is a fantastic story. Thank you so much for telling me that. Now, your parents are still living?
Yes.
And do they live close to where you are, or is it?
They live in Alabama, and I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Okay. And are you pretty close?
Yes, super
Sounds
close
like it.
because of going through the whole immigration and assimilation experience together.
And have they both, has this been a really, really good thing for them as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's night and day. My dad is just so happy teaching at the university here. They're very happy.
So when you came to the U.S., where did you settle?
So my dad first had a couple of visiting positions. So we spent about half a year in Illinois and then a year in Delaware. And then the rest of the time was in Alabama. But then whenever I finished college in Alabama, I moved to Dallas.
Mm-hmm. So besides art and cooking, any other artistic, are you a singer? Do you love music, anything like that?
I love music, but I'm not a singer.
Okay.
I feel like I have a very special connection to it. So whenever I watch movies, I love soundtracks is what stand out to me. So I have to listen to the albums of, the composers.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I do not sing or play any instruments.
But you love it.
I love it with all my heart and soul.
I love that. The reason I asked is that I do find that a lot of artists, even if they aren't musical themselves, they still love music, that there's something about all of the creation, and the creative fields that touch them. So besides painting, any other kind of do you do any needlework or anything like that? You said photography.
Yes, I did do that while I was in college, kind of as a creative outlet. And I guess the type of photography I do now is just natural. So any flowers, or I love to get like macro shots of flowers of like the natural world, that it really speaks to me.
Well, I would say that you are lovely. I am so excited about seeing your panel. And my mouth is watering even thinking about it, because I think it will make us all hungry.
I hope so.
And I think it will look really beautiful on the bags that it will be on. So I'm excited to add it to the auction. And I think that, do you have a website with your work on it? You do.
I do.
We'll make sure that we put that out when we put out all the information about the auction. And thank you so much for being on the podcast. It has been a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Lori. Thank you so much.
And it's been wonderful to get to know you. And I'm going to watch for that book on drinks.
Okay.
I think your cocktail book, I don't know. I think it's going to be pretty, no pressure, but I'm waiting.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.